this reminds me that if I want to get anywhere, and what I'm trying to do, which is to, educate the world and galvanize the world around this very important issue, you got to do things your way. You got to do things in a way that'll stand out. Normal will get you nowhere if your goal is to rock the boat and be a bit of a rabble rouser.
Absolutely. And I love that rabble rouser word, because that really is kind of, the startup ethos, the marketing ethos. We always have to be looking for that next thing, that bit of change, that unique perspective on things. And sometimes we get it right. Sometimes companies do it amazing and they really crush it. And sometimes it goes way off the rails. I'm thinking of the Pepsi, woke commercial from years ago. And I'm, as you've been going through your career, I remember thinking back to like my very first, when I was getting into marketing and advertising and I was in college, and I was like, my favorite commercial, I was geeking out over commercials. And one of my favorite commercials was the Sony Bravia commercials. Do you remember those back in the day? It was like they dropped a bunch of bouncy balls down a street in San Francisco. They blew up a bunch of
Yes.
paint with a clown running on a building in like
Yet.
a different country. It was all these like amazing visual commercials that I thought really hit that sweet spot between, you know, promoting a product, but also being artistic and things like that. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to get into the marketing world. And then I'm like doing radio commercials and things like that. But there's a lot of different things that are happening in the marketing world, and some of it's good and some of it's bad. So when did you start kind of noticing these not so great marketing messages that were going out into the world?
Oh, every day. If you're in marketing, you judge marketing all day long because you're the expert, right? I feel like even if you're not in marketing, everybody feels somewhat like an expert in marketing, right? Because we're all exposed to so much of it every single day. I actually think that's a detriment to the field. It creates a lot of like founders or CEOs or boards who undervalue marketing because they think they know how it works and what it is because they engage with it all day. It's a really interesting kind of side comment on the state of the industry. We really don't get to there's no respect for the craft of marketing, right? Everyone kind of thinks they know what it is and how it works. But so I think we all kind of go through life looking at an ad and feeling like we are not affected by it. That's a sentiment from one of my heroes in marketing, Jean Kilbourne. She was a pioneering activist, and back in the late 60s, she started to pull out advertising. Just like I have a life, like I'm gonna get it. Hold on.
Yeah.
Don't leave. Hold on. Okay, so this is Life Mag, right? It is 1964. So right around this time, right? Get Jackie O on the cover. I found this in an antique shop, and I just love it.
So cool.
She would like literally go through and just take out ads and cut them out and put them up on her fridge. Again, somebody who was just interested in advertising. In fact, at the time, she couldn't even get hired without sleeping with people, right? To get into the world of advertising. It was just hopefully different days. But what she was doing was cutting out ads that kind of looked all the same. They all featured perceptions of women that were somewhat misogynistic, right? Women in really subservient kind of roles or sex objects, or think about the 60s, you understand the advertising of the time, right? Very misogynistic. And she became the leading expert and a pioneer in the space of how advertising affects the portrayal of women and how it's connected to things like domestic violence and body shaming and health issues related to things like anorexia, bulimia, you name it. We're all affected by advertising. And so we all are kind of a student of it, or we're all just kind of caught up in it. You really only have two choices. So a long time ago, I became a student of it, just somebody who wanted to be more literate in it. That led to a career in B2B tech startup marketing. But now it's become this kind of mantle. Jean collected and built a whole body of work that's actually being archived at Duke about advertising portrayal of women and alcohol and children. I want to build on that work. So what I've done is started to notice ads that are inherently social movement oriented. So if an ad has anything to do with feminism, right, or Black Lives Matter, and even if it's just a tweet, not just mass media ads, I've started to notice things that are, more social justice oriented coming out of brands. And we've seen a lot of this in 2020. Everything from Black Lives Matter to pride, to feminism, to gun rights, to even things like what's happening at the Capitol right now and the mantle of democracy. Like brands take on these much bigger issues. And all I've done is start to put together a collection and start to notice patterns and hopefully start to illustrate, hey, this is where brands are doing it in a way that is a win-win for the movement and for the brand. And here's a way that companies are faltering in that. I like to call brands out, but also call everyone else in. Like Mary
Uh,
Ellen Slater said that to me once. She introed me one day and she said, "You call brands out, but you also call people in to solve the problem. This is not about shaming. This is about realizing the impacts and hopefully doing better. Evolution."
I love that. Yeah, and it is fascinating because it will impact us whether we like it or not. I remember back, gosh, I was so little, and this is one of the things that kind of planted the seed for me to eventually go into marketing and eventually, want to look at it from the outside too, where I'd be like sitting there watching commercials, just watching commercials with my brothers, writing our Christmas list. We didn't even know what the TV shows were. We were just like waiting for the commercials. There's no internet at the time. We're just like, what is the next toy they're going to show us so we can put it on our Christmas list because we thought Santa
I
still
love that.
existed. Sorry,
Nostalgia.
kids. I know I'm totally ruining Santa. Anyway, but like that ability to manipulate, that ability to engage, or whatever word you want to use, I think is fascinating. And to your point, I think a lot of people think it doesn't affect them. I know sometimes when I was in the depths of marketing, I'm like, well, I know what you're trying to do, so of course it can't work on me. But no, clearly it does, because unless you're actively stopping your brain from doing something like that advert, you go to Amazon, it hits you 3 or 4 times, you're buying that lamp someday. This one over here. And and so it's great that you're taking it to like that next level. You're really looking at the social impacts of it. You're looking at the cultural impacts of it. You're really taking it far beyond, the baseline. And what are some of maybe the examples that stand out to you of where companies are? Let's start with where they're going right. What are maybe some
Yeah.
examples of where they might be doing it correctly?
It's hard because it's different per company, right? Which I know it's a
Mm-hmm.
very cliche consultant thing to say, but what we're talking about is marketing, advertising, social media, any channel that connects a brand to an already existing separate social movement. So again, environmental, right? Sustainability is a big one. Black Lives Matter, feminism, LGBTQ rights, all of it. There's a few brands that I think are taking advantage of the fact that consumers are looking for. They may not be deciding, they may not know exactly what every company in their consideration set is doing, but they are starting to align themselves with brands with which they share mutual values. Patagonia is a great example of a brand that has always put sustainability at the forefront. It's actually been part of their marketing because it's been part of their business for years now. There are more recent brands that in 2020 responded to the intense, kind of still hot button issue of, Black Lives Matter, the protests that were happening, the issue of systemic racism in our various industries. They responded to it, and that response is a marketing move. And it happened around June last year, where we saw companies deciding whether or not to be issuing pride-related content because it's June, or stay-at-home stuff for the pandemic, or Black Lives Matter. They were kind of deciding between 3 different zeitgeists. One company that did it really, really well in June was Rent the Runway. Are you familiar with them? I mean,
Yeah,
I'm sure you're not
the
renting
prom
gowns on
dresses,
any
right?
red carpets. Well, anything really. It's
Oh
it's for
yeah.
anyone that wants to wear Oscar de la Renta without paying for it.
Ooh.
Full, just a rental model. And I know a lot of women who use this service. It's a beloved brand. They actually took a hit during coronavirus because a lot of the brands, the goods were being used for, events that you can't go
Events,
to,
yeah.
weddings and red carpets. But the CEO, Jennifer, one of the co-founders, Jennifer Hyman, issued this really self-aware response. Do you remember the slew of CEO responses in June that were like, "We stand in
Mm-hmm.
solidarity, racism is bad"? Just these really kind of form letter. There was one guy that made a great meme about how they all kind of sounded the same.
Yeah.
We stand in
It's like, oh
solidarity.
really? You finally figured that out. Good for you.
It's PR. It's PR, right? It's like, we got to say something, right? And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of brands just, that's all they did. They were like, we'll say some stuff, we'll donate some money, we'll say we'll work harder, and they kind of moved on. And in fact, it's January 2021 now, and how many are really thinking about it? But anyway, Jennifer Hyman issued a statement, and it was really self-aware in that it pointed out her kind of role in creating the kind of system that created the injustice in the first place, which I thought was fantastic. She said, look, our brand and the fashion industry has a moral and financial obligation to do better in this area. You know, we have a history of locking out designers who did not have access to capital to be part of our platform, like Oscar de la Renta could be, right? And so they offered a bunch of these very tangible, very important ways to get more Black designers into the whole model of Rent the Runway, the business itself. Access to the platform, access to manufacturing initiatives, things that get people through these hurdles that the systemic racism is all about, getting rid of the hurdles that create lack of access, right, for different populations. So her whole pledge was that, look, we're going to do better. We're going to do better. And here is the monetary, but also the partnership kind of support initiatives. They're also setting goals, which I thought was key. She said, are you familiar with the 15% pledge? It was started by Aurora James, her retailers.
I think share it in case anyone doesn't know. Yeah.
Yeah, well, what it is it's a pledge to say, look, if Black Americans are about 15% of the population, shouldn't they be 15% of the shelf space on retail shelves or inventories? I mean, it's a very simple ask.
Yeah.
And so Rent the Runway signed on to this pledge and said, look, we're going to sign on to this 15% pledge, and 15% of our designers, our talent, are going to be, you know, Black and represented from people of color. They also looked at behind the cameras and behind, you know, who was working on the marketing and who was in the marketing representation wise, who was part of the models of it. Really just a full holistic view at, look, we as a business, and this is a template now for anyone who's wondering how to respond to these social movements. What do we as a business bring to the table besides our marketing, besides our Twitter feed, besides our ad budget, to actually do something to help the movements that we are now trying to co-op so that we can generate all the PR benefit that they bring, that we can align ourselves with buyers. We're gonna get that trust and that connection on a value level. But what can we do that's tangible behind the scenes within our business and within our the reach that our business has into the community, supply chains, and partnerships that make something real happen? How can we give back to the movements in a way that is legitimate and not just lip service? The opposite of that, I have a bajillion examples, and they're all well-intentioned companies, but they're companies that don't see the opportunity to actually help the movements that they want to be part of, the narrative, the conversation, the zeitgeist around. That's it. This is not rocket science. This is a simple opportunity between lip service and legitimate support.